Well, let's talk more about this. Doug Burns, a former federal prosecutor, and Caroline Polisi, a defense attorney, joining us now. Good to see both of you.
Thank you.
Big win for the president today. Doug, I want to start with you.
Sure.
This is being hailed as a win for the Trump administration.
Yes.
But when the dust settles, will we see this ban in effect in its entirety, and when?
Well, it's a crystal ball. In the fall, they're going to argue the case. I do, actually. But joking aside, in the fall, they'll, address the case. What's interesting is the Fourth Circuit and the Ninth Circuit put in injunctions saying that the ban is going to be halted. It's interesting because everybody was saying, it's been stricken down, the ban. That wasn't true. It was an injunction. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. It's the same thing now. In other words, it's not as though they've put in the ban formally. They've just reversed the injunction pending the argument in the fall. My prediction is that it will be upheld, and everybody gets all up in arms about politics. It has nothing to do with politics. Legal experts all over the place have said, basically, and I'm not going to bore you now, turn it over to my colleague. There are a number of reasons why it will be upheld.
Let's bring Caroline in here.
I'm not so sure about that. I do think it's always difficult to sort of read the tea leaves when it comes to the Supreme Court. Of course, we never know what's going to happen. It's a new court with Neil Gorsuch. But I think what's interesting here is that we saw, of course, 3 justices issuing a dissent in this case. Now, dissent kind of throws you off a little bit. Of course, it was a 9-0 decision to implement this portion of the ban, but 3 justices wanted to go further. They wanted to implement the ban whole cloth. So I think when you come down to it, you've already really clearly got 3 votes in October when it comes up. You've got 3 votes to uphold this ban. They only need 2 more of that per curiam, the justices on that per curiam decision. So
your crystal ball would say, in effect, in its entirety before Christmas.
I don't know about the timing, and look, the fact is that the clock is running now. It may not need to be implemented before Christmas because the issue may be moot. Remember, this was supposed to be a temporary ban while the administration reviewed its policies.
I want to talk about these exceptions.
Sure.
You can come in if you're from one of these 6 mostly Muslim nations, if you have a family relation here or a close tie to someone living in the U.S. This is an unusual way to vet something. It could lead to more litigation going forward.
Well, my colleague makes a good point. In the concurrence and dissent, because it was 9-0, but they filed a separate opinion, Justices Thomas, Alito, and the new Justice Gorsuch. But they were complaining in that dissent, saying this is going to be really hard as a practical matter to implement. Who's to say what tie? They're saying educational ties. You have a job in a college, a university, etc. I think it's a good idea, personally, but it may be hard to implement.
So does policing it, Caroline, give us a false sense of security? As a nation?
No, I think we could see some litigation certainly come about as to what specifically this bona fide relationship means. And again, Thomas sort of brought a crystal ball to the table saying, look, this is going to have problems. DHS saying that they want to roll this out in an orderly fashion. One would hope it would be more orderly, of course, than the first time it was rolled out. So, a lot is riding on this, but really all eyes are on the Trump administration for when it's going to roll out those permanent policies and procedures. Again, this is only a temporary measure.
And enforcement of this temporary measure, previously the president had said give us 72 hours, but your thoughts on that being a timeline right now?
It could be tough, but one other point worth repeating seriously is that the ban went in March 14th. So what we're saying is, as the Supreme Court, in the opinion, and I know you studied it closely, said this may be moot by June 14th, and specifically asked the parties to address that. So the reason I say that is to simplify this. A lot of times the Supreme Court looks for a way out of actually deciding the case. Turn around and say, this is moot, we're not even addressing it.
They like to punt things.
They No,
they
that's
love
very
doing
possible.
things. If they don't have to make a decision on it, they may not.
But when the Supreme Court says something, don't regular citizens say, oh, okay, this must be well thought through and this is what our nation needs? Doesn't it give added emphasis?
Absolutely. Look, they granted cert in the first place. They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to take up this case. They could have punted it down the road in the first instance. But the fact that they took up this case at all is saying that they believe that this is an important issue. And I think, again, all eyes will be watching in October.
But if the ban runs out, effective June 14th, they're going to turn around and say simply, it did run out June 14th. don't personally, I know the crystal ball, I don't think they're going to do that. I think, you know, again, not to be a broken record, I think they will ultimately uphold this, and it'll just show the distinction between the political rhetoric and legal analysis. I'm not coming at this politically, but the president does have broad powers over immigration and broad powers over national security.
Regardless, I mean, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg agreed with President Trump on this one. So you have this win and a potential health care win. This is this could be a major day for this administration.
It could.
It absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts?
No, just that it was really interesting to change the dialogue from, oh, it's a Muslim ban, it's a heavily religiously unconstitutional. They never got to that, and I think it's enough of that already. Let's look at this thing on the merits. You can argue it both ways, that's fine, but let's do it legally, not politically, because it's getting a little tiring.
That up, because we are using the word ban.
I agree, but Trump used the word ban. We have to remember. Yes. So I mean, I think that, look, the Supreme Court is supposed to be sort of immunized from political questions. The truth is, in its history, it never really has been, and now in this day and age, more and more it's not. We see it taking on big political questions more and more. The appointment of Neil Gorsuch that Trump got on there recently, you know, that is not to be forgotten here. He came out, I think it's interesting, he didn't side with his old, he clerked for Kennedy, so he's not just, you know, going along with what his former boss had to say. He's really coming down, and he's going to make a name for himself.
I'll tell you something really funny quickly. I took the last 3 pages of the dissent and I stapled it on top by accident. So I'm reading it. I'm like, oh my God, look how positive this is for the government. It was the dissent. I read that first. So then I took it apart and put it at the bottom.
You brought up Justice Kennedy. Rumors over the weekend that he would announce his retirement. He's been there for almost 30 years. He's what
29
years old?
He's 80, yeah.
81 next month.
Right.
He didn't make any announcements today. Any thoughts on potential retirement?
I'm hearing these rumors are unfounded. I'm hearing that from clerks that went to the sort of end of the year celebration, I'm hearing that they're really unfounded. He's going to stay on.
We will see. David, you have some breaking news for us.